what the AKA underneath our class is that's the best leadership Galveston class ever.
Yeah! Ever.
So I did want to acknowledge Lorraine and Carrie. I want to acknowledge the Chamber of Commerce, particularly Gina Spagnola, my mentor who taught me everything that I know and has rehearsed with me innumerable times so that I can do this right. And obviously all the hosts and presenters that so graciously gave of their time and meals as well. So I thought I would talk a little bit about two things. One, this concept of leadership in times of crisis. John has illustrated some of that already. And I was going to share with you a little bit about COVID, the disease, and how UTMB as an institution has really addressed it from leadership. So when I think about leadership, particularly in times of crisis, all of you all are great leaders in your own right, but there's this concept that has been put out by the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative up at Harvard. They talk about something called meta leadership. And they have gone all over the country looking at leaders who have distinguished themselves in crisis situations. And they talk about, it has 3 characteristics to be a meta leader. You have to understand yourself as a leader. This is something that John already alluded to, understanding what he could bring to the situation. But more than that is understanding yourself, but also having, again, something that John mentioned, that's that issue of emotional intelligence. In addition to understanding your strengths and skills as a leader, you have to understand the situation and really deal with what are the facts on the ground and not the emotions that go with them. And then finally, you have to connect with the people you're going to lead and connect in a variety of different ways, both across and around. And so when they talk about connecting, you as a leader, this meta leader in the center, many times you have to lead up. So you may have to actually relate. If you have a boss, you may have to lead up and help lead the situation where your boss needs your guidance. Clearly, as a leader, you're going to be leading down, leading those that are following you to handle the crisis situation. In institutions like UTMB, you often have to lead across. So there's going to be companies that have different divisions, different departments, and you, in that crisis situation, is going to have to lead across your organization. But in crises like COVID, you have to sometimes lead beyond your organization to be a national leader to address the crisis on a much broader scale beyond the scope of your individual organization. So let's talk about COVID. So what was the challenge of COVID? Well, COVID was interesting because at UTMB, we kind of learned about it, I guess, early on. Dr. Jim LeDuc, who heads our Galveston National Lab, he actually had an email communication from one of his former trainees that was one of the lead scientists in Wuhan. That email came about, I think, late December, right during the Christmas holidays, saying that they have run across this unique virus. And that virus, now known as SARS-CoV-2, had the characteristics of the previous SARS virus, but was unique in the sense that it was, again, an RNA virus, and it had what they discovered to be a high degree of virulence. That meant it spread rapidly and caused illness pretty severely. And it was that nature, the ability for that particular virus to spread quickly and to cause illness, that really set a panic. So we were following this early on, and so it spread from China to Italy. And because we had so many faculty from Italy, they started to raise alarm bells here in the US for us. And we were able to activate our teams as this now started to arrive on the shores of New York. And one of the things we do at UTMB when leadership is facing a crisis, we activate something called the Incident Command Team. This team brings across somewhere between 55 and 65 leaders from across all areas of the university. It was originally designed when we got news of hurricanes and weather emergencies, and we would meet in preparation for that, the hurricane landing, and then throughout that period to keep our business operations running. This particular incident command was different in the sense it wasn't a hurricane, and usually we would meet daily for a previous incident command. This incident command we met only once a day, but we had to do it for over about 6 week period of time. We're now continuing to meet even beyond it. Now we're in month 3 or so of this, and we're meeting twice weekly. And when we have these incident command meetings, we cover all the critical mission areas and try to make sure that all components are having good leadership. That's that leading down. All the people in charge have their people in place and doing what needs to be done. So here's an example of our incident command team meeting from today. So I'm going to run through some of the stuff we covered, and it will give you a sense of where we are with the COVID virus here in Galveston and the Houston area as well. So for those of you who are running businesses, you can get sort of a sense of where things are. So our incident command, this is the agenda. You can see we have a variety of offices that report. I wanted to highlight, you see down there at the bottom, our classmate Tilly Clark. She's a part of that incident command team running our employee advisory council. So shout out to Tilly. So one of the things we've looked at, and this is, we do this in conjunction with the Texas Medical Center, we look at a variety of what we call metrics. And these metrics are designed to have what's called a stoplight report. And so green means that we have no concern, yellow means we have some moderate concerns, and red is warning. And you can see we have 4 areas that are red, reflecting the change in the trend of the COVID virus here in the local area. We've had an upward trajectory of new cases, so we've had a positive average daily growth for the last 9 days. We've had an average growth in the number of positive cases as a percentage of total. That's happened for the last 13 days. We looked at our bed capacity, although UTMB is doing pretty good. If you look across the Texas Medical Center, their ICU capacity is at 100%. UTMB is doing much better than our ICU capacity. Is probably we're using about 15% of our capacity right now. Also across the Texas Medical Center, we have a caseload with a growth trajectory suggesting that the ICU capacity could be exceeded in the coming weeks. So we have to come up with a way of being ready to address that. Areas of green really relate to our PPE, or that personal protective equipment, as well as our ability to do testing. And I'll share you a little bit about how well UTMB has done with testing for this region and for Texas. We have a radio dial for the greater Houston area where we, with the Texas Medical Center, look at our ICU capacity. You can see that we have the ability across all of the Texas Medical Center to handle over 2,800 patients. Right now, we're in the yellow, means we're getting to near exceeding our normal capacity and getting into the area where we have to maximize that by extending us into our surge capacity. So right now, we're right about 1,330, getting there to that 1,400, then getting into our maximum surge area. If you look at the positivity, and this again is the greater Houston area, you can see, let's see if I can get a pointer here. Yeah. So you can see we started back here in January, in March, very few COVID cases. Then we had our uptick in April. Then we were doing pretty good until Memorial Day. Now you can see the steady growth in the number of COVID cases in the greater Houston area. If you look at that same data for hospitalizations, you can see the same steady climb here in the last 2 to 3 weeks. If you look at Galveston, this is looking at our total cases recovered and deaths. Right now, we've had over 2,200 cases with 40 deaths. And you can see here again, our case rate had that peak in April. This was, I believe, the nursing home cases. And then you can see that steady growth here where we stand at today. Again, this is our active cases that are currently being monitored by the county health department. You can see the steady growth in cases. This has been an interesting slide as well. As you remember, when COVID started, a lot of the cases, and particularly the mortality from the cases, we found in the older age groups. Now we see there has been a shift. You see we still see the number of people who've died from COVID are here here in the older age groups. That's the dark blue. But look at the number of total cases. The most cases are now in the 21 to 30 age group. Again, reflecting Memorial Day and people not social distancing, and sorry for my folks that own bars, hanging out in bars. If you look at Harris County, and that was for Galveston County. If you look at Harris County, again, you see the same thing, but much larger increases. If you look across Texas, this is the cases that we look at daily for the caseload across Texas. You can see the same dramatic increase across Texas over the last 7 to 14 days. And this is looking nationally. So this is Texas compared to nationally. And you can see again our rates where we're moving. And then you can see the number of new cases in the US. Again, in March was our large peak. This was really the New York group. And now you can see you're starting to get to pick up again, fueled by Texas, Florida, some of the other states. This is looking at our case positivity rate. Here you have high positives because we weren't doing as many testing. Most of the testing during this period were people that were symptomatic. Now you started having asymptomatic testing. Our test positive rate has dropped as the number of tests has gone up. But then toward the end of the cycle, you can see the slow uptick in the positivity rate. Looking at what UTMB has done, this is the number of people we've tested that are part of UTMB system, mainly here at Galveston Island. We've tested almost 50,000 patients. We've had over 3,500 of them positive. I'll just help you follow this. We've admitted currently 111 patients. Over the course of the disease, we've had over 666 patients that were admitted, and the total deaths were 73. And the number of ventilators, these are people that were in severe respiratory, needed to be on a ventilator, is 15. And then if you look, let me see if I can go down here. You can see we've captured people from all over the Galveston County and the region. UTMB also, so I wanted to show you this. This is what we go over pretty much every morning. There's more slides on that, but I didn't want to take up the time to show you everything. But this is what I meant by leading and understanding the reality of your situation. When we have reports from our units, that's when we're talking about having that connectivity and leading across. But now I'm going to show you how UTMB has led beyond just the borders of UTMB. Oh, forgot, sorry about this. In addition to looking at just the statistics, we list our primary objectives for that incident command team. And we focus, number one, on protecting life. That's the life of patients, the life of our community, our students, and our staff and faculty. So that's what we focus on initially and primarily. We also want to protect our facilities. Again, that relates to that, making sure our facilities are able to run. And we want to continue our mission of caring for patients, caring for this community of Galveston, but also educating students and the health professions and doing research to try to find an answer to this virus. So just to make you a little bit more proud of your home institution here in Galveston, UTMB has actually conducted over 100,000 COVID tests. We have done probably the bulk of all testing for the greater Houston area. We've done testing for probably most of the counties in the eastern part of the state of Texas. So we're testing across the state of Texas because we were able to get our testing up the fastest and to have the fastest turnaround time. So we're really doing, the scientists of UTMB have done a yeoman's job in getting testing up and then helping to understand this virus as we move forward. Just a sign of that, we have the #1 microbiology immunology department in the country. And that group has taken on the challenge of understanding this virus and coming up with a cure. The researchers at UTMB have submitted over 147 research proposals to examine COVID. We've had over 48 new awards since the crisis has started, for totaling approximately $19 million in research funding. We were participants in the trial that brought remdesivir onto the market. We were part of the major trial centers that allowed that to get FDA approval. We're currently participating in 2 vaccine trials, and we're leading the way in coming up with understanding how to develop immune protection from this virus. Our researchers have the platform to allow us to test in the lab different viruses, different vaccine and different drugs before they get released into clinical trials. So that platform has been a major advance to how we're able to so rapidly get to a effective vaccine for COVID. So I'm going to issue a challenge. I've talked to you a little bit about how we've addressed leadership. Again, leading across. I hope you can see how we've led beyond. I hope you can see how we have led both within our institution, both below, and again, leading upwards and informing our boss. But I'm going to ask this class to take another approach to leadership because we have another crisis. You know about the current national movement around diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. I was fortunate to be in a previous leadership class. It was called Leadership Nashville when I was in my time in Nashville. And my Leadership Nashville class has decided to take on this challenge. They're having meetings where our class has decided to help all the members think about how to address the issue of having an anti-racism challenge to take it forward to the city of Nashville. I'm going to say to the Best Leadership Galveston class, there's an opportunity here. I ask you to take a second and imagine. Here we had Galveston put on the national news because of its Juneteenth legacy. Wouldn't it be wonderful to extend that legacy now to saying that Galveston now is the best city in the world in terms of addressing fairness, opportunity, inclusion, and eliminating racism from all walks of life in the city? Could we not, as Leadership Galveston, as the Best Leadership Galveston class ever, decide to take leadership and on this issue? With that, I'm going to stop and let you look at Galveston sunset as you come up with some questions. for me. So I'll open it up if anybody has any questions about what I talked about.
I don't know, Charles, just a kind of a general question. Obviously, I mean, you can't give an exact answer to this, but I mean, where do y'all see? I mean, do you just see the levels kind of staying where they are for a couple of weeks and maybe eventually dropping back down a little bit? Or, I mean, what y'all's feel? I mean, obviously the levels are way up, the young people and all that. I'll let you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to know. If you look at the models we projected, right now we're at a doubling time in terms of doubling of new cases running around 5 days. In terms of what we've projected out so far, we haven't reached a peak in the regression lines that we've modeled. So my hope and my best guess is this doubling is going to probably continue to the second week of July. I'm thinking around July 15th, July 18th, and I hope that we'll get some leveling off then. But we're going to continue on that sort of upward trajectory until then. Maybe I'm wrong. The data from today, we were better today than we were yesterday. So maybe I'm a little too pessimistic, but I worry, particularly with the July 4th holiday coming, will we continue having an upward spike at least for 14 days after that. So I have my fingers crossed.
Charles?
Newton, this is Kathy. Are tests for people who currently aren't showing symptoms, are tests recommended to see if you've had it and recovered from it?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile having that information because if you're having symptoms, we're not at the point where you can just assume you have COVID. So, for instance, we're not at what we call a saturation point in the population. So I think it is helpful to go ahead and get COVID testing if you're showing symptoms. The interesting thing is, if you compare this to like flu, during flu season, it was real important because you had to differentiate between this and influenza. Now that flu season is gone, there are some that are arguing that if you have symptoms, you could assume it's COVID. I'm not fully in agreement with that because the population prevalence rates are hovering around 18-20%. When that population prevalence rate gets around 40%, 50%, 60%, then you can say, yeah, you probably don't need to be tested if you have symptoms. You can just assume you have it.
Okay, thank you.
Charles, I have a question. I noticed today that the governor has suspended elective surgeries in several counties in Texas. Do you think that's gonna be the same here as UTMB, that we'll go back to not doing the elective surgeries?
Right now, the only place that's being affected by that is our Clear Lake campus. So the Clear Lake campus, yes, we're not doing elective surgery there and moving them actually to our League City campus. I think it depends on how things continue to go. I think the governor is reluctant to mandate that for counties where the prevalence rate in those counties again is a little lower. So it depends on how we do it. If we continue on our upward swing, yeah, in 2 weeks we may be looking at that we'll have to back off elective surgery. If we continue that, like I said, that every 5-day doubling rate, by then the numbers would demand that we have to go back to restricting elective surgeries. But again, I'm hoping I'm wrong, and I'm hoping people who have got the message is going to do right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just
Well,
a
I hope this
comment
is-
that I